Welcome to Bigfoot for Breakfast, home of the mysterious and the macabre, where we sit in the basement every week challenging conventional thought. We are your hosts, Samantha Carter
and Sarah Jones.
It's a pleasure to be speaking to you, and we really appreciate you listening to our little show. Say hello to my little show. If you have just come across us, please don't forget to push the subscribe button, and if you're feeling really generous today, recommend us to a friend and rate us on iTunes. We're just starting out, so it'd be great if you fine folks would help get the word out about us. Check out our website, bigfootforbreakfast.com, and feel free to add us to Facebook for future updates and discussions as well.
That reminds me, we're having a little contest. So if you've listened to the show and if you like it, and if you have the Apple Podcast app or Google Play, go into one of those apps and leave us a review and a rating. Even if it's one word, it would be really helpful. I don't know, sometimes it's harder to come up with one all-encompassing word to describe something, so if you have to add more than one word, go right ahead. Do what you feel in your soul.
I prefer the word fabulous, talented, charming,
witty. We like witty.
After you do that, go to our Facebook page, and at the top, there's a post about the contest. Comment the username that you left the rating and review under so we can tell who you are and how to contact you. On Halloween night, we're going to have a drawing on Facebook Live for all the people who have left us a review and a rating thus far. The winner of the drawing will win a cool insulated coffee mug with Bigfoot for Breakfast logo on it and a t-shirt made by our girl Gina at With Love Custom Creations in Sheraton, Iowa. So, free stuff! Yay! Just for telling us how you like the show. Speaking of the show, let's get on with it.
Let me start by asking a few questions. How would you feel to know that another person was watching you? Watching you every single day. Specifically, and only you. Watching your children. Knew their names. Not only their names, but their nicknames. What you called them in the privacy of your own home. What part of the house they played in and what they were doing when they shouldn't have known this unless they had been inside. How would you feel to have no idea who this person was, where they were, or what they really wanted? What if this went on for months, for years, and it seemed like this is all they did, day in and day out, and nothing was off limits? Just watch your family and wait.
Beyond that, what if there was nothing you could do about it? No one would listen to you, and some even blamed you, turned on you, and this situation completely took over your life.
This week's story is, I would say, a total head-scratcher. It was actually featured on NBC's Today Show last year and for a while really garnered quite a bit of attention during its peak. The story involves a family who took the brunt of the misfortune, but seems to really revolve around a large, very impressive and beautiful sage green home with white trim at 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. It sits at 3,900 square feet with 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, 2 fireplaces, and a verdant garden. It has a very Dutch colonial look and immediately made me think of the Amityville house upon first inspection. It definitely has that ominous beauty vibe to it. It lies in the heart of upscale suburban Westfield, the kind of place with extremely strict zoning laws, a housing association that will hunt you down if your grass gets above the standard 2 inches. At this time, there were 30,000 residents in the town. It had been named the 99th most wealthy city in the United States, the 18th most wealthy in New Jersey, and the 30th safest town in America. Sounds like a pretty wholesome place.
The house was built in 1905 by J. Herbert Purcell, who would later publish a book about the history of Westfield. Around 1932, William Davies, the mayor of Westfield, bought the house for $1 from Purcell, which is kind of a strange transaction, but even stranger is the continuation of strange transactions down the line.
Davies sold the house to his son and daughter-in-law in 1947 for the total amount of $1. That's no big deal, typical family transaction. But they sold the house 2 years later to another couple, the Birds, for $1. 2 years later, the Birds sold the house to another couple, the Bakes, for $1, who then turned around 2 years later in 1951 and sold the house for, you guessed it, $1 to another couple, the Schaefers. Kind of weird. Maybe no one wanted to stay there for a reason. It does sound like the Schaefers remained there for a little longer until the house was sold to John and Andrea Woods in 1991, who stayed there for 23 years until the house was sold in 2014 to the Broaddus family.
A young couple by the name of Derek and Maria Broaddus bought the house for $1.3 million. That's a far cry from $1.
It is, right? I mean, they made a heck of a profit.
Right?
But I don't think the Woods bought it for $1. I couldn't find their sale price. But I think it went up until the Schaefers. And then they stayed there for quite a while.
And they weren't having it.
They weren't having it.
Make
They probably
money.
sold it to the Woods for a decent price. But the house, I mean, $1.3 million. And I think this is just because it's in an affluent community.
Mm-hmm.
New Jersey. Probably real estate's more expensive in New Jersey than Iowa.
Maybe they were just doing tax evasion and sold it for $1 and sold it for cash.
Could be. It's just weird that it went down for that many families.
Yeah, weird. Derek came from a working-class family in Maine and had worked his way up the corporate ladder to vice president within his insurance company in Manhattan and was earning a pretty substantial salary, enough to buy a $1.3 million home in an affluent community. Maria had grown up right there in Westfield and was over the moon excited to bring her 2 children back to her hometown and raise them among friends and familiarity. This was the Broaddus dream home. They were so proud to be the new owners, and I'm sure that this was a huge milestone in their lives together. According to Derek and Maria, the kids were also very excited about their new home. They had run through the house immediately, picking out their new bedrooms and arguing about which of the 2 chimneys Santa Claus would use on Christmas to deliver the presents. Everything seemed so perfect, so happy. But almost immediately, some crazy and very creepy things started happening. I'm not talking about paranormal things within the house, I don't think.
On June 5th, Derek had just celebrated his 40th birthday, and a mere 3 days after their purchase, the family set to doing a few renovations inside and outside of the home. Pretty normal stuff when you just buy a new house. Painting, repairs, some minor changes. Derek was inside painting the walls and getting ready for the big move, while Maria and the kids were back at the other house that was just getting ready to sell. He went out to check the mail, not expecting a whole lot since they had just closed on the property and had only forwarded a few bills so far, and that's exactly what he found. A few bills, and oddly, a small, plain, white, invitation-size envelope with a little card inside. The card was addressed to the new owners, and the address was written in thick, large handwriting. Opening the envelope and taking out the card, it read this.
Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. 657 Boulevard has been subject of my family for decades now, and it approaches its 110th birthday. I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here now? How did you end up here? Did 657 call to you with its forces within? I will find out.
Obviously, at first, this seemed like a typical welcome to a new neighborhood. A person who admires the house, so he really didn't think much of it. But he continued reading, and well, you heard it, it got pretty weird. I'm sure Derek found himself wondering, first of all, why are they watching? And what is the second coming? And what is in the walls? This guy has a lot of questions, but I'm sure by now Derek has more. The letter continues.
I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy. You have children. I have seen them. So far I think there are 3 that I've counted. Are there more on the way? Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family, or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me.
What? This has just begun and already sounds incredibly ominous and threatening. Obviously, this is no typical welcome letter, and they're already talking about the fact that they have children. So, they've been watching them already at least a little bit. The letter continues still.
Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I'm in one. Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I'm in one. Look out the many windows in 657 at all the people who stroll by each day. Maybe I am one. Welcome, my friends, welcome. Let the party begin.
So 3 days after closing on their new home, this is what they get. It's hard to put myself in the positions and know what I would have done next. You hate to run right to the police over one simple letter and nothing else. Maybe it's someone just messing with them. Maybe it's someone who wanted to buy the house and got outbid and wanted to freak them out as a little jab. Who knows? People have done a lot crazier things, and it does get crazier.
Strangely, the writer didn't reveal his true identity, but ended the letter simply calling himself The Watcher, signing the typewritten letter in a bold cursive font at the bottom. I mean, if the name like The Watcher doesn't pique a person's interest, I don't know what does. He did pretty good as far as villainous nicknames are concerned. It's simple, yet bold and dark, clearly stating his purpose as a bad guy. I really think he put some thought into it. A+ in this category for sure.
Definitely incites a sense of paranoia.
It does.
The writer of the letter claimed that he had been charged with keeping an eye on the house and mentioned their young children, referring to them as young blood.
I mean, it could be kind of endearing at first. You know, when you're initiated into a gang and they're like, we got some young blood.
Or playing hockey.
We got some young blood in here. They're being nice, but I don't know. I get the feeling that's not what he means.
No, I think he wants to eat them.
I think that's what I'm getting to.
That night, Derek went home to his wife and children, opting not to stay the night in the house alone. Derek, you are so smart.
Right? This has got Scary Movie written all over it, and you did the right thing.
I'm thinking that sounds like an extremely rational decision on his part. He told Maria about the letter, and they sat down and wrote an email to the house's previous owners, John and Andrea Woods. The Woods wrote back pretty quick, telling the Broadus that they had lived in the house for 23 years and had never received a letter like this. Except for one. Well, I feel like that should have been placed in the disclosure.
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
That comes up.
A couple of weeks prior to moving out, and they had just dismissed it and threw it in the trash. They couldn't even recall what the letter had said. The Woods stated that they had always felt very safe in the house and rarely felt the need to even lock their doors. So that's something I would do. I just wouldn't read the letter and I'd throw it out, and with my luck it'd be like, you're going to be murdered in 7 days unless you reply to this letter.
This is a chain letter.
Oops!
If you don't reply, you're going to be hit by a car. And then bam.
Sorry.
I wonder if that's what happens to people. They didn't
They just
reply
don't
to the
reply.
Watcher. The next day, Derek and Maria, along with John and Andrea Woods, went to the police station to report the letter, as it was just threatening enough to leave them a little worried about it. The police agreed that it was concerning, and they did go out to the house to check things out. But there really wasn't a whole lot that could be done except to document it. There was a lot of people, when I was reading through these articles, that were just bashing the police about this. But really, one letter...
What are you supposed to do?
Yeah, like, who do you arrest? What did they want them to do?
I'll kick everyone's ass in this room!
Yep. So, the police recommended moving pieces of construction equipment away from the house so that they couldn't be thrown through windows or used to gain entry. They asked Derek and Maria if they had any known enemies, and they didn't seem to. But in the end, the worst that could be charged from one ominous letter would possibly be harassment, and they don't even know who the sender is. The police told them not to talk to any more neighbors about it since any of them could be possible suspects, and they all agreed.
The more time went on, the more concerned they grew. They hadn't heard anything else out of the Watcher, and he had specifically written about wanting to find out more about the children so he could call them to him. They kept the kids pretty close, not letting them out of their sight, and Derek even went so far as to cancel a much-anticipated business trip that they had planned for him in order to stay home with his frightened family.
On June 18th, a few weeks after the first letter arrived, along came a second letter.
Welcome again to your new home at 657 Boulevard. The workers have been busy, and I've been watching you unload carfuls of your personal belongings. The dumpster is a nice touch. The house is crying from all the pain it's going through. You've changed it and made it so fancy. You're stealing its history. It cries for the past and what it used to be in the time when I roamed its halls. The 1960s were a good time for 657 Boulevard, when I ran from room to room, imagining the life with the rich occupants there. The house was full of life and young blood. Then it got old. So did my father, but he kept watching until the day he died. And now I watch and wait for the day when the young blood will be mine again.
So, we gather that he has indeed been keeping an eye on the family and on the house, and that he's very concerned with how the house feels about all of the changes that it is going through. I kind of feel like this guy is projecting a little bit of his own anger about the new owner's personalization of the house. Like he's pretending that the house is mad, but it's really him. Think about it. No one is going to care about how he feels, but if you tell someone that their house is angry, that's a little more scary, right? Did you know that some cats can jump higher than a house?
What?
It's
No, they
because cats have really strong back legs and houses don't jump.
Oh, yeah. Nice dad joke.
This is what happens when I don't sleep.
If we can believe the words of the person penning the letter, we can also determine that he seems to have been closely associated with the house in the 60s. He may not have been the owner, or his family may not have owned it, but maybe he worked there, since he says he ran from room to room, imagining a life with the rich occupants.
Have they found what's in the walls yet? In time they will. I am pleased to know your names now, and the names of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names often. 657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found all of the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. Will they sleep in the attic, or will you all sleep on the second floor? Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It'll help me to know who is in which bedroom, then I can plan better. All the windows and doors at 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I am the Watcher, and I have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession, and now you too, Broaddus family. Welcome to the product of your greed. Greed is what brought past 3 families to 657 Boulevard, and now it has brought you to me. Have a happy moving day. You know I'll be watching.
Things have now taken a turn for the terrifying.
You sure have.
It's not funny. At this point, there's something in the walls.
I'm sorry. What could it be? Old documents? A torso? The possibilities are really endless.
He knows who they are and tells them that they should be scared of their basement and the house's secrets. The Broaddus parents should not let their kids go too far away so they can hear them if they scream, and this guy will be keeping an eye out for who's sleeping where in the house so that he can plan better. Burn it. Burn it to the ground.
It's over at this point. There's no sleeping there.
No.
Okay.
Man, for $1.3 million though.
Oh, it's a bad deal. When I first read this, I thought, dang, if the Broaddus family was...
Dang.
Dang, man. If the Broaddus family was mildly concerned before, they're probably petrified now. And this is correct. At this point, Derek and Maria stopped bringing their children to the house altogether. And they've decided to keep working on the house here and there, but to put off moving until they get this figured out and until they feel more comfortable. Obviously, they don't want to put their kids into any danger.
A formal investigation was now launched regarding the letters that the Broaddus family were receiving. But this was putting an obvious strain on the family. They had sold their house in New York and had been banking on moving into their beautiful new Westfield home that was now becoming a nightmare. They ended up moving in with Maria's parents until they could get things figured out. They were feeling paranoid and nervous about the letters. The way they were written seemed threatening and directly addressed to them and talked about their kids. Was the house the reason for the letters? Would somebody be coming after them? Were their kids safe to go to school, to play in the park? Not only were they concerned for their safety, but people in the neighborhood didn't really seem to believe them or really be on their side. One day, Derek was showing a neighbor couple the changes that they had made to the house and was giving them a tour. He told the news agency that his blood ran cold when the neighbor lady stated, "It'll be really nice to have some young blood in the neighborhood." Who was the Watcher? It could be anybody at all. Was it someone that they already knew? Someone that they trusted?
Maria reported experiencing PTSD from the ordeal, and Derek states that he actually fell into a depression. I could see this. Dealing with these letters and whether or not there is a threat, and also paying what I am sure was an insane mortgage on a beautiful home that you couldn't even move into. And since they were paying that mortgage, I'm sure that kept them living with Maria's parents, since they likely couldn't afford to rent or buy anything else. They had 3 choices: get rid of the house, move into it, or try to rent it out for what the mortgage payments were.
About a month later, a third letter arrived to the house.
657 is turning on me. It is coming after me. I don't understand why. What spell did you cast on it? It used to be my friend and now it's my enemy. I am in charge of 657 Boulevard. It is not in charge of me. I will fend off its bad things and wait for it to become a good again. It will not punish me. I will rise again. I will be patient and wait for this to pass and for you to bring the young blood back to me. 657 needs young blood. It needs you. Come back. Let the young blood play again like it once did. Let the young blood sleep in 657 Boulevard. Stop changing it and let it alone. You wonder who the Watcher is? Turn around, you idiots. Maybe you even spoke to me. One of the so-called neighbors who has no idea who the Watcher could be? Or maybe you do know and are too scared to tell anyone. Good move. I walked by the news trucks when they took over my neighborhood and mocked me. I watched as you watched from a dark house in an attempt to find me. Telescopes and binoculars are wonderful inventions. 657 Boulevard survived your attempted assault and stood strong with its army of supporters barricading its gates. My soldiers of the boulevard followed my orders to a T. They carried out their mission and saved the soul of 657 Boulevard with my orders. All hail the Watcher. Maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away but makes you feel sick day after day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet. Loved ones suddenly die. Planes and cars, bicycles crash. Bones break.
The Broadduses state that they became so paranoid about these letters and their details and dark nature that pretty soon it completely consumed their lives. Derek Broaddus stated in an interview that both of them were utterly obsessed with finding out who this person was. Derek admits to putting up cameras all over the property and inside of the home trying to catch the Watcher in the act of delivering the letters. He was also said to have spent nights in the house, staying awake, crouching and crawling along in the dark, trying to catch any activity that was not normal. They hired experts, FBI agents, private investigators, but could not ever seem to get any answers as to who could be doing this.
So the couple decided to explore their options. The house was big, not very affordable, and had a scary stigma attached to it. So they decided to look into actually tearing down the house and splitting the lot into 2 different lots and building 2 separate, smaller houses to sell instead. In such a great neighborhood, they could put them on the market for a good price each and make the majority of their money back, they thought. They took the measurements and the plans to the neighborhood planning committee, and they found that, according to the rules, the lots were 3 feet too small for the neighborhood's liking, so they were quickly declined, over 3 feet. The Broaddus family was extremely discouraged, especially Maria, who wrote a letter to the association stating that she expected more from a place that she has always called home. She grew up here and brought her family back here. She stated, "You know what we've been through. You had the ability 2.5 years into a nightmare to make this a little better, and you've decided that this house is more important than we are."
So at the end of the day, I think Maria is completely right. The community was very aware of the situations going on with the Broaddus family, but they chose not to help because the 2 yards would be 3 feet too small for their liking, and they felt the 2 smaller houses wouldn't look as fancy and aesthetically pleasing as the large colonial home that was already sitting there. It seems that they were afraid to appear just a little less upscale with a couple of smaller homes in the neighborhood. The Broadduses seemed to have every intention of moving into the home with their family, acclimating themselves to the community of Westfield, but now they are stuck hemorrhaging money into the house that they can't even live in while they try to find somebody to buy it.
Derek and Maria put the house on the market, which didn't really go very well. The place had become such a frightening urban legend in their local area, and despite its beauty and appeal, nobody would buy it. No one even seemed remotely interested in purchasing the house, or even close to the amount that they would need in order to not take a devastating financial hit because of the situation with the Watcher. Derek and Maria decided to be upfront with any potential new buyers about the letters, and had given copies to their realtor in order to make sure that they were disclosed before any true interest was shown in the house.
The Broaddus couple was becoming very angry and suspicious of their neighbors and neighborhoods surrounding them. They ended up taking the Woods to court over this due to the fact that they had admittedly received at least 1 letter from the Watcher prior to moving out and did not disclose this prior to closing. They were seeking nullification of their contract with the Woods punitive damages, and a refund of their purchase price with interest, according to the New York Times article on the matter. In the end, the lawsuit ended up being thrown out, and the Woods actually countersued Derek and Maria for defamation and frivolous litigation and requested that the case go to trial. There was really no recourse for the Broadduses. New Jersey is a buyer beware state, meaning that the seller does not legally have to disclose the history of the house or any negative events that may be attached to the house prior to the sale.
There were other confrontations as well. The people who resided in this affluent fairy tale community didn't like their vibe being disrupted and were extremely offended about having been questioned by the police regarding the letters. They really just don't want their image messed with. This is going to screw up their safe, uppity soccer mom image.
Speaking of members of the community, soccer moms, let's just dive right into the suspect pool. The first person who was questioned was a man who I can't find an official name for, but he was nicknamed The Gamer. See, why with all the nicknames? This whole community sounds like some sort of crime organization with the nicknames that they've got going on. The trail started here when one day a car drove very slowly by the Broaddus' home and then stopped just down the road facing it. It sat there for a while, long enough to garner suspicion before being called into the police. The police tracked down the car, now parked at a house down the block, and went to question the owner. It turned out that the car was registered to a woman who was the girlfriend of the man who owned the house. While I couldn't find that he offered any explanation as to why he was driving this way down the street and seemed to be scoping out the house, it should be noted that the man in question was very heavily into video games, hence the nickname, and his primary gamer tag that he used was reportedly The Watcher. Crazy coincidence? No. That's the guy. That alone, that's enough evidence. Go to jail. That seems to be as far as they got with him, though. There was really no other proof that he had done anything wrong, and they had no reason to arrest him. People are allowed to drive slowly along their block, and having the same gamer tag as a person who wrote letters naming themselves a Watcher really isn't enough proof that they were one and the same. Although, it's pretty uncanny.
Another person who was heavily questioned here was another neighbor by the name of Michael Lankford. Michael lived in the house directly next door to the Broaddus' house, with his very elderly mother and several of his middle-aged siblings. A lot of people have speculated that this is kind of a strange dynamic, a bunch of middle-aged siblings who still live with their mom, but members of the community stuck up for him, and they didn't agree that Michael should be a suspect. They stated that he wasn't capable of anything like this.
That's what they always say.
Right. Michael was interviewed and questioned twice by the police during their investigation. Michael's family was extremely angry about the accusation, and they claimed that the police, along with Derek and Maria, were harassing their brother. Some of the details do fit with Michael, though. Michael's father had died 20 years earlier, which fits the timeline of him watching the house and then Michael taking over upon his passing. Also, in one of the letters, the Watcher mentions that one of the Broaddus children were using an easel to draw in an enclosed porch on the house that can't easily be seen from the outside. But the way Michael's house was positioned with the Broadduses, it could easily be seen from there. Being a neighbor in close proximity, he could have easily overheard the children's parents speaking with them, calling them by personal nicknames that were mentioned in the letters. But still, with not enough definitive proof to take him to jail, this also fizzled out.
Some say that it's probably high school kids playing a prank and messing with the new inhabitants, and others have speculated that it's a former housekeeper since they said they had run the halls dreaming of a life with the rich owners of the house. It seems as though this is a person who spent a lot of time here in the past and has a lot of fond memories here. Maybe the child of a past housekeeper? But it seems to have been decided by the police that this is not so. It makes me wonder if they looked into this and found any former housekeepers were no longer living and any children that they must have had likely checked out.
Some of the neighborhood residents and online sleuths state that they think that it was a previous potential buyer who wanted the house but couldn't afford the $1.3 million price tag that came with it. According to the Broaddus' lawyer, Lee Levitt, there was no bidding war. They were the only offer, so this didn't make any sense either.
Then there's this theory that they're all in on it.
Which is the one I think.
Right? The whole creepy neighborhood.
Right. Because it makes sense for Michael being able to see inside the porch and hear the nicknames. And it also makes sense with the gamer tag. I think that there's a team. I think that it's the neighborhood. Anyway.
Some people believe that the well-to-do Stepford Wives type neighborhood had already decided that the Broaddus family weren't a good fit for their image. So they collaborated and conspired early on to drive them out. Working together, and possibly with the police, they penned the letters, then all covered and stuck up for each other when they became suspects or were questioned. This sounds a lot like the plot for Hot Fuzz.
Yeah. The last theory, and this one seems to be pretty popular, is that Derek and Maria Broaddus sent the letters to themselves. It is thought that they bought the house prematurely and figured out pretty quick after making the impulse buy that they weren't going to be able to afford it. So they panicked and made up a story, mailing themselves letters in order to try to get out of the purchase and rid themselves of the house. While many people seem to think that this is the answer, I can't say that I'm convinced that this is the case. On the surface, this would be reasonable. But when you look at all of the money that the Broaddus family was out of because of this, for example, the money that they poured into lawyers and private investigators to try to figure out who the Watcher is so that they can prosecute them and safely move into their home. It's reported that they spent over $100,000 between the PI and a forensic linguist, along with hiring a former FBI agent by the name of Robert Lennon to perform a threat assessment. Also along with the mortgage and maintenance money that they were pouring into the house while they lived with Maria's parents. This doesn't seem to make any sense. If they initially wrote the letters, you would think that they would early on realize that this tactic wasn't going to work and then go ahead and move into the house that they ended up paying for anyway. They would have known that there wasn't any danger if they wrote the letters, but they never did move in and they were forced to keep pouring money into it. Also, it's said that another family on the block also received a strange letter approximately around the time that the Broaddus family received theirs. But although I found that little snippet of information, there is nothing that tells me what this letter said or if it came from the Watcher, so I don't even really know if it's relevant.
Although many agree that the Broadduses are the unlikely culprit, even more still continue to state that they are, and that their motive was even more different. They think that Derek and Maria did this in order to make the house infamous, relying on a possible Hollywood movie deal. If that is the case, then they were somewhat successful because a screenplay titled The Watcher is being developed at this time by Netflix, who beat out many other production companies in what was described as a ferocious bidding battle. Netflix is said to have purchased the rights with a 7-figure bid. I couldn't find a release date for the movie yet, but it will be interesting to see how it compares to the story.
At some point, Derek and Maria did end up getting someone to rent the house, although for much less money per month than they were paying in mortgage payments. From what I understand, one additional letter has been received by the renter, who gave it directly to the Broadduses. Most of the letter has not been disclosed yet due to investigation purposes, but parts of it were. In the end, the Watcher continues to threaten them, stating, "You are despised by the house. The Watcher won." Sounds like a pen pal from hell. However, I guess he is technically correct. He did in fact win the Demented Weird contest.
Like we won the contest with Netflix because we did it first. Anyway.
Right? Scoop. Take that, Netflix.
The FBI investigation did turn up one thing, though. There was DNA found on the letter that determined that an unknown female had handled the letter along with Derek and Maria, not the renter.
No, this is the initial investigation, so the first and second, third letters.
It makes sense that Derek and Maria had handled it, but who was the unknown female? No other DNA was found. Weird. I would have pegged the Watcher for a guy, but hey, girls can do anything and be crazy. There are no gender roles here, even in stalking.
This past July, Derek and Maria did end up finally selling the home and ridding themselves of it for $959,000. This is almost a $400,000 loss that they took on this home from the purchase price, not to mention the reported $100,000 worth of renovations that they did and the money that they spent on investigations into their stalker. The Broaddus family owned the home for a full 5 years and never even got to move in.
You know, it's too bad that it didn't work out. In a lot of situations, it might have been nice to have a watcher. The plant watcher. Like if you go on vacation or something, or the cat watcher. It might have been a good house buying perk.
I know.
Date night, we're going out, need a babysitter.
Just get the watcher. You need someone to watch your dog? Get the watcher. You need someone to watch for suspicious activity? Watcher. But at this time, he is the suspicious activity. I wouldn't have him babysit my young bloods. Those events also came in the wake of a previous mark on the history of Westfield, New Jersey. In November of 1971, a man by the name of John List lived here, pretty close to the Broaddus home. He murdered his wife, his 85-year-old mother, and his 3 children at his home, and then fled. He disappeared for 18 years before he was found and captured by authorities. It's said that he was so meticulous in the planning of these murders that it was nearly a month before these crimes were even discovered. So no wonder the Stepford people don't want any more stains on their reputation.
Any more bad blood?
The John List murders look pretty bad. That was pretty rough on them, I bet.
That concludes this week's episode of Bigfoot for Breakfast. We would first and foremost like to thank Drew from the Betrayed podcast.
Thank you
for taking the time to lend us his voice as the Watcher in this episode. He and his co-host Gina have a really great show featuring people who went through major events in their lives stemming from betrayal.
They have great guests who talk about some of the most vulnerable points in their lives. Drew and Gina feel that everyone needs a place to tell these stories of being betrayed and hope that their platform can be a place for people to talk about this and for their listeners to be able to hear and relate. One pretty awesome thing about the hosts of this show is that they have a pretty cool history themselves. At one time, they were part of a group that helped to expose over 200 online child sexual predators. This is absolutely amazing work, and these two are heroes in our book. So check them out. They upload a new episode every Friday. Just search for The Betrayed on your podcast app, or you can listen to them on YouTube as well. They upload there every Saturday. We've really appreciated their help with this episode, and we've really enjoyed their show, and we think you will too.
As usual, thanks so much for listening to us this week, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you've been enjoying the show, don't forget to leave us a rating and a review, as this little gesture makes a big difference in our world and goes a long way to help the show, which we really do appreciate. Until next time, I'll be watching you.
And I.